Have you ever been shopping, picked something up, looked at the price tag, and just thought, why? Right? Why does this thing cost that much? Pricing can seem really simple on the surface, but it's actually this fascinating puzzle. It's a mix of hard economics, tricky psychology, and some really clever strategy. So today, let's pull back the curtain and decode the hidden logic behind the prices we pay every single day. And we're going to start with a question that I think everybody's run into. You go out and buy a printer, and it's surprisingly cheap, maybe 70 bucks. You get it home, you're feeling pretty good about the deal, but then a few months down the line, the ink runs out, and you find out that a new set of cartridges costs $30. That's almost half the price of the entire machine. What is going on? I mean, it feels like a total scam, right? But it's not. It's actually a very, very deliberate pricing strategy. And to really get it, we need to start with the absolute basics. So first, let's step out of the messy, real world for a minute and into the, let's call it the clean, perfect world of economic theory. This is where we can see the fundamental forces that shape every single pricing decision, long before things get complicated. Okay, so take a look at this. This table shows the core trade-off in all of business. On the left, you've got the price per unit, dropping from 180 bucks all the way down to zero. And as the price goes down, surprise, surprise, the quantity you sell goes up. That makes perfect sense. But now look at that column on the right, the total revenue. It doesn't just keep going up and up. It rises for a while, it hits a peak somewhere in the middle, and then it actually starts to fall. So here's the first big takeaway. A lower price doesn't automatically mean more money in the bank. Now, economists have a way of visualizing this whole relationship, and they call it a demand curve. It's basically a simple graph that always slopes downward. All it's showing is that as the price of something falls, the demand for it rises. This simple line, this curve, is pretty much the foundation for everything we're about to talk about. So why does that revenue number go up and then suddenly start to fall? Well, the magic word here is elasticity. See, on the top part of that curve, demand is what we call elastic. That means a small price drop leads to a huge jump in sales. So many new customers show up that your total revenue goes way up. But once you pass that peak, demand becomes inelastic. Now, if you drop the price, you only get a handful of new buyers. The extra money you make from them isn't enough to make up for the discount you're now giving everyone else. So your total revenue actually starts to shrink. But here's the thing. Businesses aren't really in the business of maximizing revenue. I mean, revenue is great, but the real goal, the only goal that matters, is maximizing profit. And to figure that out, we have to bring a whole new player into the game: costs. Okay, so here's our table again, but now we've added costs. We've got a $50,000 fixed cost. That's stuff like rent that you have to pay no matter what, plus a variable cost of 65 bucks for every single unit you make. So you take your revenue, you subtract all those costs, and what's left over is your profit. And look at that. The profit peaks at $115,000 when you sell 3,000 units. That's a totally different spot than the peak for revenue. This is the bullseye the company is aiming for. Now, there are basically two ways to find that sweet spot. You've got the accountant's approach, which is pretty much what we just did. You make a big spreadsheet, you calculate the profit for every possible sales number, and you just find the biggest one. It works, it's straightforward. But then you have the economist's approach. It's a little more elegant, and it gives us a single really powerful rule to live by. And here's the rule. This is the golden rule of pricing theory. Profit is maximized at the exact point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Whoa, okay, what does that mean in English? It's actually super simple. Marginal revenue is just the extra cash you get from selling one more item. Marginal cost is the extra cost of making that one more item. So the rule is, as long as selling one more widget makes you more money than it costs to produce, you should do it. The second that flips, the second it costs more to make than you'll earn, you stop. That's the peak. And for anyone who wants to get really precise, you can turn all of this into a bunch of algebraic equations, and when you run the numbers, you find out the exact sweet spot isn't even 3,000 units. It's 2,875 units, sold at a price of exactly $122.50. We're not going to do the math here, but it just goes to show you how powerful this theory can be. Okay, so that's the theory, but let's be real. In the actual world, no business just gets a perfect demand curve handed to them on a silver platter. That perfect clean theory is the starting point, but reality is, well, it's a lot messier. There are a few other critical things they have to think about. You can pretty much boil down all of practical pricing to these 3 C's. First is cost. This is your price floor. You absolutely have to charge more than this to survive. Next is customers.
This is your ceiling. What's the absolute most people are willing to pay for what you've got? And finally, you have competitors. They're like the walls of the room, boxing you in and limiting how much you can really move your price around. Every single price you see in a store is a balancing act between these three forces.
And when smart companies think about that first C, cost, they don't just look at the factory cost of making one thing. No, they use something called life cycle costing. They add up everything from the very first dollar spent on design and development through all the production and marketing and even all the way to the costs of shutting down a product line and cleaning up. They want to make sure the price they set today will be profitable over the product's entire lifespan.
So, knowing all this, the theory, the real-world pressures, how do businesses actually go about setting their prices? Well, they use specific strategies, and I guarantee you're going to recognize some of these. So let's say you're launching a brand new product. You can basically go in two totally opposite directions. First, there's price skimming. This is where you start with a really high price to skim the profits from all the early adopters who are willing to pay a premium. Think about the first ever iPhone. Then, over time, you slowly lower the price. The other way is penetration pricing. You do the exact opposite. You launch with a rock-bottom price to grab as much of the market as you can, as fast as you can. And that, my friends, brings us right back to our printer. The strategy being used there is called complementary product pricing. The idea is brilliant, and it's simple. Sell the main thing, the core product, for a really low price to get your foot in the customer's door. And then you make all your profit on the other stuff, the stuff they have to keep buying over and over again to use it. So that $70 printer, the company probably doesn't make a dime on it. In fact, they might even be losing money on every single one they sell. That printer isn't the real product. Its only job is to be the hook. It's a low-risk, cheap purchase that gets that machine into your house and, crucially, locks you into their system. Because this is the real product. The $30 ink cartridge. That's where all the profit is hiding. It's a high-margin sale that happens again and again and again, long after you've totally forgotten what you paid for the printer in the first place. This is the classic razor and blades model, and now that you know what it is, I promise you are going to see it everywhere. So you can see, pricing is never just a one-and-done calculation. It's not about finding a number and sticking with it forever. It's this continuous, strategic game. It's a puzzle that companies are constantly trying to solve and resolve. There's a great quote from the writer Ken Garrett that sums it up perfectly. He says, "It is rarely completely clear that the correct price is being charged for long-term profit maximization. Even if the correct price were being charged today, it is unlikely to be stable. In other words, even if you find that perfect price right now, it's not going to be perfect for very long. The market shifts, competitors move, customers change. It really is an art that's just informed by science." And that kind of leaves us with a final question to chew on. For any business out there, the right price is always, always a moving target. So maybe the real goal isn't to find some single magical number. Maybe the goal is just to get really, really good at the art of the chase.